Hey guys, Barrett here. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to go about upgrading your pickleball paddle. Stay tuned. I'm going to give you guys 5 general things to look out for. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video because these are really important if you want to upgrade your paddle efficiently. But first and foremost, this is my PSA, my public service announcement here. Upgrading your paddle does not necessarily mean spending more money, okay? It doesn't mean that you have to pay for more than what your paddle is worth now. So if you have like a $100 paddle, upgrading doesn't mean that you have to pay more than that, like $150, $160 or whatever. That's really important to know. Some people, when they start pickleball for the first time, they play with whatever paddle they were introduced with, which is fine. But sometimes people have these like 10.5-ounce paddles and stuff like that. And they think to themselves, well, this paddle is worth $140, so certainly I need to buy one that's more expensive than that, right? Not necessarily. You could easily downgrade, so to speak, price-wise to $100 or $110 and have a paddle that complements you much better. So keep in mind that when it comes to upgrading your paddle, although oftentimes you're going to be looking at a more expensive paddle, that's not always the case. Sometimes downgrading is going to be the answer. So if you keep in mind these next couple of tips, that will really help you to make a more efficient choice price-wise. The first thing that you want to focus on when it comes to upgrading your paddle is to figure out what you want in terms of shape. So we have these elongated paddles, and then we have the regular old standard paddle, right? You have the 8-inch wide paddles, and then you have these kind of elongated versions, and especially the versions like these. Everyone has seen these with the short handle and the super long face. That's going to be your first step. Do you want a standard paddle, a standard sized one, regular old paddle, or do you want an elongated paddle? So for some people, they're okay with short handles. Typically, when you have an elongated paddle, you're going to have these short handles. So if you're cool with that, if this is comfortable to you, then getting an elongated paddle is okay. But for a lot of people, I mean, you can see here, look at my grip. It takes up the whole handle, and it feels really top heavy, right? So if you feel like you're not getting enough reach, if you feel like your mobility is a little bit limited and you need that extra sort of reach with the paddle, then getting an elongated one could be the answer for you. That will really help you eliminate a bunch of different choices, and it'll help make that process from here a lot easier. The next step that you want to focus on when it comes to upgrading is try to figure out whether the paddle you have now is too heavy, too light, or just right, okay? I did not mean that to rhyme, but this is really important because weight and weight balance is a big part of what it means to have a pickleball paddle. So if there's a couple of signs that will tell you if you have a paddle that's too heavy or too light. If you have a paddle that's too light, what you'll probably notice is that your shots perform at a more extreme angle or extreme sense than what you're used to. So as an example, if you were doing an overhead smash, okay, an overhead with a paddle that's too light, if it's too light, then you're going to swing harder than what you're used to. And so therefore, when you swing harder, the angle is going to go down more, okay? If the paddle is heavier, the angle isn't going to go down as much because it's heavier and it's harder to swing. So if you have a paddle that's too light, as you're swinging down, it's going to go forward more, and the ball is more likely to go into the net or just go really short. So notice the patterns. If there are any patterns in your game, if you're noticing, wow, I've been hitting tons of these overheads into the net, and that's very unusual for me. Or if you're used to if you've got this like bullseye precision sort of roll, like 4-shot roll shot that you love doing, and you're used to painting like the back left corner of the court, but you notice it's going further out to the left, that probably means that your paddle face is closing down too early, right? Because it's too light and it's going to go out. The exact opposite effect happens with a paddle that's too heavy. You hit the ball too late on like an overhead as an example, and the ball goes out the baseline because you're hitting it with this angle instead of that angle. Okay, so that's the first thing when it comes to weight. Try to focus on the patterns of what's happening. If you notice that there's something going on with that, that could be a sign that your weight needs to change. Get yourself a little kitchen scale, I've got one around here somewhere, and weigh the paddle, see what's going on. And that will really help you decide where your weight range is so you can get something that's right for you. Now, the second part of weight is the balance of the weight. So it's not just 7.5 ounces or whatever the weight is. It's 7.5 ounces that's balanced in a certain area. Some paddles are very top heavy. Engaged paddles are known for being quite top heavy. Other paddles are more handle heavy. The weight is more focused down here. If you have a more handle heavy paddle, it's going to feel lighter in your hands. Okay. If you have a more top heavy paddle, it's going to feel a little bit heavier. So focus on what's good for you. If you were a previous tennis player, you're probably going to like something that's a little bit more top heavy. If you were a ping pong paddle or a table tennis player, you're probably going to want something that's more handle heavy. So try to focus on what you prefer. I prefer something that's quite balanced, not too top heavy, but definitely not too handle heavy either. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to figure out, the weight balance, they don't really have like specifications for that. You're just gonna have to try it out and see what works for you. Now, the third thing to focus on when it comes to buying a new paddle is to focus on the handle. The handle is a big deal in pickleball, and I don't think it gets talked about enough, especially not on this channel. I haven't done a very good job of talking about the handle too much, but here's the thing. The Selkirk Invicta is a very, very good example of this. The longer your handle is, okay, the further away your hand can be from the weight of the face, okay? The further away your hand is from the weight of the face, the more leverage and the more snap and the more power you can get with the paddle. Now, that's not necessarily where power comes from, but having a paddle like this where you can hold all the way down at the bottom means that my sort of anchor here is further away from the face. You can just try this at home. Try holding it up here, see what that feels like, and then hold it up here and see what that feels like. It's much lighter. So if you're one of these people that likes to hold it down at the bottom like I do, like this, you're going to want a longer handle, 5 inches, 5.5 inches, something like that. However, if you don't mind that at all, if you're not the kind of person that does third shot drives or rolls or anything like that, then getting a shorter handle like this could be fine. Is there really an advantage between the two? Not necessarily. However, typically on paddles, if you do have a shorter handle, that means you're going to have more face coming down. Okay? If you compare these two paddles, notice how the Omni comes down further. You see how there's more face at the bottom, whereas there's less face at the top of the handle on the Invicta? That's the difference. Okay? So although I get more leverage with this paddle, there's less room down here for error. So keep that in mind. When it comes to circumference of the handle, I really don't care too much about the circumference, just because if I get something that's a bit too small, I can just apply overgrip and build it up over time and get to where I want. So typically I like to get the smallest circumference so I can build it up, whereas if I had the largest circumference, I can't take it down. So if you're kind of iffy on that, just get the smallest version and you can just build it up over time if it doesn't work for you. And lastly, focus on the brand. Now it really isn't that important. We've talked about the really, really important ones weight, the handle, the weight balance, and so on. But if there's a brand that you really like, then go for it. That can really help to make the decision. If you notice that you're basically between two different manufacturers that essentially make the same type of paddle, so to speak, like it's the same weight and size and so on, just go with a brand that you like. Is there something that they do that you like? Like, is there a certain kind of, they have like a certain style or something that you really appreciate? Then that can help you make that decision. But focus on the weight, the handle, the weight balance, all that stuff first and foremost. Don't just go to the brand if you can. I understand brand loyalty, and that's okay. I appreciate that. But you want to make sure that you've got the right paddle for you, a paddle that complements you. And sometimes you have to move away from a brand that you really like in order to get that experience for you. Upgrading a paddle is so much about figuring out what is going to be best for you and how it best complements you. If you're the kind of person that does a lot of drives, then you may want to focus on a paddle that has a longer handle. If you're the kind of person that focuses on more drops or more dinking, then maybe you'll want a little bit shorter handle so that you'll have more face. Focus on your own game and what really is going to complement you in the end. Guys, I hope that was helpful. That's my little spiel about upgrading your paddle. I do have some resources on my website. Those links are below in case they're interesting for you. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. And as usual, I'll see you next time.